Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful day. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead and subscribe there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays and Thursdays. If you have not already, go ahead and give the stream a like. This pushes me out to the algorithm so that we can reach more people, help encourage, entertain, and educate. So thank you so very much for that as well. If you have not already, also please go to my Substack to get put on the email list so that you are aware whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. You guys also have that there. Thank you so much to everybody that's watching. And just to let you guys know, this will be a deep subject matter that we're going to be talking about. What are we doing today? Well, we are reading chapter 5, part 1 of The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks. So we're getting back into Bell Hooks right now. Just to let you guys know, this is going to be a deep subject matter for this part. So I'm just going to let you guys know, subject is going to be sensitive to many viewers. So if you are easily triggered, especially in regards to things like sexual assault, this is part of the conversation that we're going to be having in this book. So if you guys do not wish to watch this particular one, I fully understand, and I will welcome you back when we do another reading. But please be kind to yourselves. If you cannot handle this, then just do not watch. But this is also going to be very sensitive to some viewers, okay? So we're going to be continuing the reading of The Will to Change. And we're going to be starting in chapter 5, which starts on page 75. This was uncomfortable for me because subjects like this make you uneasy. It's pretty much, we live in a very puritanical culture, so these subjects do invoke some feeling of unease. So just to let you guys know, if you guys see me feeling uneasy, it is because it's a lot to get through, okay? So we're going to get started, and then we will discuss throughout. Now, chapter 5 is called The Male Sexual Being. Now, I will also have to censor my words a little bit because we're on the tube. So I will let you guys know when I'm censoring, especially when it comes to a certain appendage on males. I may have to say eggplant or something like that. You know, that's just how I have to do it. But needless to say, hope you guys got something to drink. I have myself some water for this evening, and let's get into it. Most men and women are not having satisfying and fulfilling sex. We all have heard the notion that men come into relationships looking for sex and not love, and that women come into relationships looking for love and not sex. In actuality, men come to sex hoping that it will provide them with all the emotional satisfaction that would come from love. Most men think that sex will provide them with a sense of being alive, connected, that sex will offer closeness, intimacy, pleasure. And more often than not, sex simply does not deliver the goods. This fact does not lead men to cease obsessing about sex. It intensifies their lust and their longing. If women have been taught through sexist socialization that a journey through the difficult terrain of sex will lead us to our heart's desire, men have been taught that their heart's desire should be for sex and more sex. Coming in the wake of sexual liberation, women's liberation seemed to promise heterosexual and bisexual men that women would begin to think the same way that males do about sexuality. That female sexuality will become just as predatory, just as obsessive as male sexual desire. Lots of men thought this was the promise of paradise. Finally, they were going to be able to go for the sexual gusto without having to worry about commitment. Sexist logic had convinced them and convinces them still that they can have a connection and intimacy without commitment, that have, dick, and will travel meant that their needs could and would be met on command at any time, anywhere. In our culture, these attitudes towards sexuality have been embraced by most men and many post-sexual liberation, post-feminist women. They're at the root of our cultural obsession with sex. When I first began to write books on love, to talk to lone individuals and then large audiences about the subject, I realized that it was particularly impossible to have a serious discussion about love, that serious discussions of love, especially public conversations, are taboo in our society. Yet everyone talks about sex. We see all manner of sexual scenes on our televisions and movie screens. Talking about sex is acceptable. Talk shows engage audiences daily with explicit discussions of sexuality. Discussions of sex are fundamentally easier to engage in because in patriarchal culture, sex has been presented to us as natural desire. Most folks believe we are hardwired biologically to long for sex, but they do not believe that we are hardwired to long for love. Almost everyone believes that we can have sex without love, but most folks do not believe that a couple can have love in a relationship if there is no sex. This is actually really interesting because you hear of sexless marriages, right? Now I've heard of loveless marriages, but those are not as prolific. Those are not as widely discussed within our society as, oh, well, you know, I'm not getting it in the bedroom, so I guess I'm just going to have to go someplace else, or I'm not getting it, so I guess that, you know, my love for that person is going to have to, you know, go by the wayside. But this is a whole... All right, so some of y'all are going to look at me weird for this, but it's whatever. I think the angle that Bell Hooks is coming from is from a monogamous angle. However, we also, how can I put this? In our puritanical society, we have been taught that monogamy is the default. In reality, humans have different relationship orientations that are not all centered on monogamy. So in this way, I see the angle that Bell Hooks is going, but at the same time, I'm like, you're centering it in a framework of just monogamy, when in reality, humans don't all subscribe to the ideals of monogamy. Polyamory, polygamy, different types of non-monogamous relationships are also natural to human beings, and yet they are seen as unnatural because of Western, Eurocentric, Judeo-Christian culture. So that's how I'm reading it. So as you listen to this, you're going to hear from that. But at the same time, I'm going to maybe have a little bit of pushback with Bell Hooks on this one. In certain instances, not all. So let's continue. Feminist movement was able to challenge and change notions of female inequality on many fronts, particularly in such arenas as work, education, and religion. However, sexism continues to shape the ways in most people think about sexual relations. No matter how many men in our nation are celibate or have any occasional sexual experiences, people still believe that sex is something men have to have. Underlying this assumption is the belief that if men are not sexually active, they will act out or go crazy. This is one thing I think also needs to be nipped in the bud, is that there's this notion that if we don't get it, then we're going to become maniacal, right? What's between our legs does not drive us that strongly to a point where we will we'll become maniacs if we don't have it. It makes men seem as if we are devoid of self-control, when that's not the case. We are actually, yes, we are fully capable of self-control just as much as females are. So, yeah, that's a false notion that is constantly been pushed our way. This is why male-on-male sexual violence is accepted in our nation's prisons. This is why I'm only going to say this word once, and I'm going to switch it for sexual assault. But this is why rape, whether date sexual assault, marital sexual assault, or stranger sexual assault, is still not deemed as a serious crime. This is why the sexual assault of children, especially when conducted by mild-mannered, nice men, is allowed. If this were not so, celebrities accused of sexually abusing children would no longer be cultural icons. The assumption that he's got to have it underlies much of our culture's acceptance of male sexual violence. It is why many people continue to believe that anyone who is sexually assaulted may have asked for it by seductive dress or behavior, no matter how many television programs have aired the facts about sexual violence. Children today learn more about sex from mass media than from any other source. Whether watching daytime soap operas, a porn channel, or X-rated movies, children in our nation are more aware of the body and of sexuality than ever before. Yet much of what they are learning about sexuality conforms to outmoded patriarchal scripts about the sexual nature of men and women, of masculine and feminine. They learn that in the world of sexual relations, there is always a dominant party and a submissive party. They learn that males should dominate females, that strong men should dominate weaker men. They learn that whether he is homosexual or heterosexual, a man deprived of sexual access will ultimately be sexual with anybody. This is another false premise. If you are truly heterosexual, if you're truly straight, no amount of seduction from the same gender will cause you to turn. Same thing with those of us who are gay or homosexual. No amount of seduction from the opposite sex will turn us straight. It's not going to happen. So that whole premise of, oh, I turned a straight guy. No, you didn't. You got lucky with somebody who's sexually fluid that suppresses their sexual fluidity, and you were able to bring it out of them. That's what it was. Now, that being said, I do think that more men who profess to be straight are more sexually fluid than they're willing to admit. It's just, it is more socially acceptable and convenient to say they're straight because they fear being ostracized. But if some men were actually very honest with themselves, they would say, I lean more towards women, but I'm sexually fluid a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. But because of patriarchy, because of the system that we live in, because of societal standards, a lot of men are afraid to say anything outside of I'm straight. Because if they do, they fear they will be ostracized, especially by other men. If deprived long enough, even if he is straight, he will have sex with another man. If he's gay, deprivation will lead him to engage in desperate acts with women. Again and again, children hear the message that from mass media that when it comes to sex, he's gotta have it. Adults may know better from their own experience, but children become true believers. They think that men will go mad if they cannot act sexually. This is the logic that produces what feminist thinkers call, I'm going to say it one more time, rape culture. Males, whether gay or straight, learn early on in life that one of the primary rewards offered to them for obedience to patriarchal thought and practice is the right to dominate females sexually. Yeah. That's the ultimate prize. We're taught the ultimate prize is getting your jollies off. Once you have that, that's the pinnacle. And it's deeply entrenched in our culture. And if no female is around, they have the right to take place on. If no female is around, they have the right to place a weaker male in the female position. In the anthology, Victims No Longer, Men Recovering from Incest and Other Sexual Child Abuse, men who have been victimized by stronger boys, brothers, or other male peers share how the logic of patriarchal thinking about the right of the strong to do as they wish with those whom they deem weak was presented to them by their abusers. The same logic has usually shaped the thinking about sexuality embraced by adult abusers. Ed writes of his older brother's sexual abuse of him. Trigger warning. I'm going to have to switch out some words, but here we go. Quote, I learned about sex when I was 9 years old. I was giving fellatio at 10. While other kids were out playing with guns, I was learning how to please a man. I was taught how to be a woman. My brother liked to act out fantasies in which he was the man and I was the woman. End quote. This older brother married and took with him into marriage the notion that it was his right to have sex with anyone he desired, whether they wanted to or not. His need to dominate was the salient feature in all of his sexual relationships. This type of culture, what is brought in to our brains, starts off pretty young. Even when it comes to we're like 4 or 5 years old, if we somehow make a friend with a female, is that your girlfriend? And it's funny because a lot of times people will think that you're sexualizing kids by teaching them about like gender identity, sexual orientation, things like that. And yet people do not want to talk about how heterosexual people sexualize kids way more. You'll even see it on babies' clothing. Like how the ladies love me, stuff like that that's written on their onesies. So it is deeply embedded in us to have this certain type of view when it comes to sex and in interacting with the opposite gender. So yeah, continuing on. Within a culture of domination, struggles for power are enacted daily in human relationships, often assuming their worst forms of situations of intimacy. The patriarchal man, who will never respond to demands from his boss with overt rage and abuse, will respond with furies when intimates want him to change his behavior. Men who do not daily lie and cheat at their jobs do so in their intimate bonds. This line is usually connected to inappropriate sexual behavior or to discomfort about sexual behavior. In his powerful essay, Who He Was, Eric Gutierrez recounts how he told lies to cover up the reality that his father was gay. Quote, at about the same time I began lying about my father, I began lying about myself. I didn't offer my lies indiscriminately, rather than making up comforting details that would portray my flashing gay father more like the hardworking, lawn-mowing dads that lined our street. I instead embellished his shortcomings, his weaknesses, his rages into real perversity. I enthralled my classmates with stories about how my father would tie us up or throw crystal goblets at my terrorized mother. I was an accomplished liar, building false identities for my father and myself by overstating truths on its own trajectory, end quote. Lying about sexuality is an accepted part of patriarchal masculinity. Sex is where many men act out because it is the only social arena where the patriarchal promise of domination can be easily realized. Without these perks, masses of men might have rebelled against patriarchy long ago. You got to think, how many men out there that are gay that hid who they are, that even lied to women that they were in love with, or that they fell in love with, or that they pushed themselves to fall in love with, to have children, and they continuously hide themselves until maybe later in life they finally either come out of the closet, or because of shame and guilt, because of patriarchy, they end up cheating on their wives with other men because they've hid that part of themselves for so long instead of being honest with themselves from the get-go. But they weren't honest with themselves because they feared being ostracized, feared being viewed less than by their male peers, by society in general. It's sad, man. I remember when I was from the age of 10, I tried my hardest to be attracted to females. I tried to have crushes. I even announced it. There was this girl. I'm not going to say her last name. I remember, I think her name was Angela. Is it Angela or Ashley? It started with an A. This was me in 5th grade, 10 years old. I tried to have an attraction to her. I tried to like her, right? But in reality, At 10, I was looking at my Puerto Rican male classmate. I was looking at him. I wasn't looking at her. Like, I tried to look at her, but my eyes kept darting back to him. Why? Because who I naturally was, I was going against it. What if I stayed that course? What if I lied to a young woman? See what I mean? So that's why it is important for us to be more honest with ourselves and give each other space and permission to be honest with one another. But we don't do that because of the system of patriarchy, because we fear being ostracized all the time just for being who we are, because patriarchy is built on capitalism, on Judeo-Christian, and when I say Judeo-Christian, I mean really more of a perversion of it, of Judeo-Christian values. And so ultimately, yeah, it was tough. Even in my teenage years, I tried my hardest. But no matter what, always be, my desire would always go towards the same gender, no matter what. And I'm glad that I never truly got so deep into talking to a young woman to the point where I would lie to her and myself, and then I would end up having to break her heart months, years down the line. I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But that's what patriarchy does, man. This part's going to be sensitive, so let's get into it. Little boys learn early in life that sexuality is the ultimate proving ground where their patriarchal masculinity will be tested. They learn early that sexual desires should not be freely expressed, and that females will try to control male sexuality. First of all, that sentence right there, that is the whole crux of the argument for the incels. Incels will blame women for their power over them, when in reality, that's not the case. So yeah, we're getting into that territory. For boys, this issue of control begins with the mother's response to his phallus. Usually she does not like it and she does not know what to do with it. Her discomfort with his phallus communicates that there is something inherently wrong with it. She does not communicate to the boy child that his phallus is wonderful, special, and marvelous. That same fear of the boy's phallus is commonly expressed by fathers who simply do not concern themselves with educating boys about their bodies. Sadly, unenlightened approaches to child abuse may lead parents to fear celebration of their child's body, especially the boy body, which may respond to playful physical closeness with an erection. In patriarchal culture, everyone is encouraged to see the phallus, even the phallus of a small boy, as a potential weapon. This is the psychology of rape culture. Boys learn that they should identify with the phallus and the potential pleasure erections will bring, while simultaneously learning to fear the phallus as though it were a weapon that could backfire, rendering them powerless, destroying him. Hence, the underlying message boys receive about sexual acts is that he will be destroyed if they are not in control, exercising power. The adolescent sexual socialization is the vulnerable moment in a boy's life when he's required to identify his selfhood and his sexuality with patriarchal masculinity. It is the meeting place of theory and practice. During these formative years, when a boy's sexual lust is often intense, he learns that patriarchal culture expects him to covertly cultivate that lust and the will to satisfy it while engaging in overt acts of sexual repression. This splitting is part of the initiation into patriarchal masculinity. It is a rite of passage. The boy learns as well that females are the enemy when it comes to the satisfaction of sexual desire. They are the group that will impose on the boy the need to repress his sexual longings, and yet to prove his manhood, he must dare to move past repression and engage in sexual acts. So this is kind of the duality. You have to control yourself, but you need to go buck wild. And it's like we're constantly confused. We have to kind of toe that line. And it's tough because the thing is it's like, well, you have all this power, but if you wield this power, you're going to harm somebody. But you should wield this power whenever you want, but then you should hold it back. It's like we're always confused. You know what I'm saying? Because we're constantly told that, well, this is just you. You're a boy. You're natural. You should be able to do all this. But then if we do it, then it's like, well, you shouldn't have done it. And you're wrong. It's like it's the contradiction in patriarchy that is constantly at play here. Sexual repression fuels the lust of boys and men, shedding light on the negative impact of this socialization in the essay Fuel for Fantasy, the ideological construction of male lust. Michael S. Kemmel demonstrates that sexual repression creates the world in which males must engage constantly in sexual fantasy, eroticizing the non-sexual. Exploring the link between sexual repression and sexism, he explains, sexual pleasure is rarely the goal in a sexual encounter. Something far more important than mere pleasure is on the line: our sense of ourselves as men. Men's sense of sexual scarcity and an almost compulsive need for sex to confirm manhood feed each other, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of sexual deprivation and despair. And it makes men furious at women for doing what women are taught to do in our society: saying no. Despair and rage are the feelings men bring to sex, whether with women or with other men. Encouraged to relate to sex in an addictive way by the patriarchal thinking in which says he's got to have it, males must then adjust to a world where they can rarely get it or never get it as much as they want, or where they can get it only by coercing and manipulating someone who does not want it, usually someone female. In The Heart of the Soul, Gary Zukav and Linda Francis describe the characteristics of individuals of sexual obsessions. They cannot rest from thoughts of sex. They move from one encounter to the next. Each sexual experience brings only temporary relief from their craving, and it quickly returns. No amount of sexual activity can satisfy it. They explain that the sexual craving is not for sex, but for something deeper. The fact that craving always returns is the clue that addictive sexuality is not simply about getting sex. For the patriarchal male, he may be straight or gay, addictive sexuality is fundamentally about the need to constantly affirm and reaffirm one's selfhood. It is not only through sex that he can experience selfhood, then sex has to be constantly foregrounded. Zukov and Francis explain, the more intense the pain of fear, unworthiness, and feeling unlovable becomes, the more obsessive the need to have a sexual interaction. Because we're taught it's the pinnacle of where you find yourself in a way. And then we're also taught that anything expressing affection outside of the realm of sex is shown to be gay. You want to give your homeboy a hug because, I mean, affection is important as a human being. You can't. Or at least if you do, it has to be one, rare, and it has to be kind of half where you dap each other and then come in with one arm. You can't give them a full enveloping hug. You can't express like maybe, you know, rubbing somebody on the back or their shoulder or giving somebody a kiss on the forehead or the cheek or holding their hand. You can't do that because then you're seen as gay. And if you're seen as gay, that means you're seen as feminine. If you're seen as feminine, that means you're seen as weaker. And if you're seen as weaker, that means you're seen as less than. So then what do men do? We repress our need for physical affection, even if that physical affection is purely platonic. So then the only essential piece of physical affection that we can get is through sex. So we fulfill our platonic and romantic affections through sex. Because we don't get that need for platonic affection anywhere else. So that's how it is. Because we're constantly told to hold back the part of ourselves that has our feminine energy. We're told to deny it. Remember we talked about earlier, sever it. Sever that part of ourselves. Sex then becomes, for most men, a way of self-solacing. It is not about connecting with someone else, but rather about releasing their own pain. The addict is often an individual in acute pain. Patriarchal men have no outlet to express their pain, so they simply seek release. Zukov and Francis stress that the sex addict fears being inadequate and he fears rejection. Quote, the stronger the emotions are, when there is no willingness to feel them, the stronger becomes the obsession with sex, end quote. Male sexual obsession tends to be seen as normal. Thus, the culture as a whole colludes in requiring of men that they discount and disown their feelings, displacing them all onto sex. Steve Berman makes this point in the essay, Why Men Are So Obsessed with Sex, explaining that even if we do not engage in compulsivity in an anonymous casual sex, pornography, masturbation, or fetishistic attempts to recover what has been forgotten, sex nevertheless takes on an addictive character. Whether straight or gay, male sexuality assumes this addictive character. So I'm going to stop there. But this is deep. There's a lot, to go over in this, and this is an important and necessary piece for us to talk about. Is our relationships to that, our relationships to intimacy, and why we are encouraged to be obsessed with it, but then at the same time, if we act on that obsession, then we do horrible things. Because patriarchy needs men to stay within a certain framework so that we are usable when it comes to exercising the power of the predator class. What is something that is used in war in order to induce fear and suffering? Is it not sexual violence? Of course, they want their soldiers to do this, but it's kind of like an unspoken rule. It's like they don't want you to do it, but they are not necessarily going to condemn you for doing it unless you get caught. How many times have we seen that the IOF, the Israeli Offense Force, commit sexual violence? We've seen it in many different articles, in different news outlets about Palestinian women and men being subject to sexual violence when detained or kidnapped by the IDF. We've heard about it in wartime in Vietnam, the Korea War. It is used. And it is a tool that the predator class wants us to be able to have, but it's just don't get caught. Because it's a means of subjugating the world. Patriarchy is a tool used by the predator class to get us men to operate like robots. This is why they fear a revolution. Because this is people, especially men, looking at the predator class in the face with our hearts full of humanity, and we say, no. Go ahead and give a stream a like. That pushes me out into the algorithm. Thank you so very much to all of you for watching. Now, just to also include this, I would like to give a shout out to all of the patrons on Patreon. Or without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. And so let's look at the tiers. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And thank you so much to new members, TJ, Nicole Vance, and Robert Sperry. Thank you so very much to everybody for becoming a patron member. And that helps keep the lights on, especially now. And also, just to let you guys know, I am demonetized. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. Thank you so very much to everyone for keeping me going. So I'll be getting into the next reading of Prejudicial by Margaret Kimberly. So I'll be trying to get into that soon. So stay tuned for that. That is going to be coming up this week. I'm going to try to get it out as soon as I possibly can. So thank you so very much for your patience in that front. And yes, also I'll be getting into Of Water in the Spirit again. And just to let you guys know, please stay tuned for this Tuesday. I will be having a show this Tuesday, and I will be talking to Dr. Devon Price, the author of Laziness Does Not Exist, will be joining me this Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am so excited. So please make sure to tune in and share. If you guys enjoyed the readings of Laziness Does Not Exist, you guys are going to enjoy this conversation with Dr. Devon Price. I cannot wait to talk with him. So thank you so very much to everybody for sticking around for that reading. It was an amazing time, and I'm just excited to pick Dr. Price's brain, especially in the process of writing this book. So it's going to be good. With that being said, I'm going to head on out. But before I do, I'm going to share a quick video, and I hope you guys get a lot out of this. This will be my closing video. And so just keep on thinking about how we can open our hearts more as men, how we can be more of, embracing the different energies of ourselves, especially, saying no to a system that wants us to be robotic. So yes, please keep doing that. And like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. And when it comes to leaving the world better than you found it, also that means in teaching our boys to embrace their entire scope of humanity, to embrace all of their emotions, to give them permission to be well-rounded, to not be robotic. I think that's important. And also to give each other permission. Let's not clown on each other, when we display something that we typically see as feminine. Let's not clown on each other. Let's embrace it. Let's look at each other and say, all right, man. All right, I feel you. Cool. All right. Let's not dog each other. All right. Because when we do that, we're doing the work of the parasite class, man. Let's not do that. Let's continue to show each other love and compassion. All right. Love you guys for watching. Mwah! Forehead kisses to every single one of you. I will see you guys in the next one. Have yourselves a wonderful day.
Whoever was in charge of assigning Men's Mental Health Awareness Month on Gay Pride Month has mastered their craft, because the male loneliness epidemic is our reward for centuries of homophobia. The two things are forever linked. Nobody supports men's mental health. Yeah, because holding up the next man is gay, right? You can see even as young as kids like 6, 7, 8 years old. I do a lot of mentorship, right? They are absolutely terrified to be caught by their peers doing anything that's associated with femininity, even things like gentleness, kindness, thoughtfulness, right? Under fear of being called gay or not manly enough. And this thought process only gets more warped and twisted the older they get. Liking women too much is considered gay. If I was to get on this app right here and start talking about, I love women so much, the way they smell, the way they look, the way they talk, the way they act, that's how I feel about black women. But if I were to make a 5-minute video about it, right, what are people going to call me? Soft, panderer, beta male, a lesser man, gay. Now, homophobia at this point has created a vacuum where men can only fill it with things like loneliness, isolation, hypermasculinity, hypersexuality. Why is that? Because the only straight way to show affection is with a romantic partner. And this typically creates two realities. Either one, you end up burdening the other person with the entirety of your mental and emotional well-being, right? Or two, because you've cut off these thoughts and feelings for so long, you're unable to emotionally express yourself. I get so irritable sometimes when people be like, oh, men are better friends than women. We don't be falling out over nothing. We should. We need to fall out about more. Only spaces you can show affection to another man in are sports and music, right? Like if I were to say, oh, my best friend is 6 years, I haven't seen him in a month, man, I can't wait to see him later on tonight. That would be quite queer of me. But if I were to say, oh, I can't wait to see Gunna in concert later on tonight, that's totally socially acceptable. Like I used to be a college athlete, and one of my friends is a wide receiver at UCLA, and we walking around campus one day, and people are coming up just, oh my gosh, bro, you went crazy last night, you so da-da-da. And it's an audience primarily of men showing love and affection because it's within the context of sports, and that's socially acceptable. As soon as that context is removed, so is the love and affection, right? And I think that's why so many people turn into absolute burnouts as soon as their sporting careers are over. Going from experiencing camaraderie, affection, kindness every single day between your teammates and your general community to just zero in day-to-day life is jarring, bro. The average man can name an obscure compliment they received platonically 3 years ago because it's so rare that they receive one. You've ever just been outside with a woman, you know their reality is completely different. They're constantly being showered with compliments and giving them, right? I love your hair. I love your glasses. I love your eyes. I love your smile, right? And I think sometimes this can create a twinge of jealousy that you see a lot, especially on the internet, right? Where people feel like, oh, women's lives are so much easier. No, the biggest difference is that as a straight man, it's not enough to just be straight. You have to prove you're straight every single day. That is not natural. I'm not here to smut nobody or be like men are trash, because I understand most of us are doing our best. We just trapped in a system that wasn't founded by us. But at any given time, you can really walk out that cage, bro. There are no locks. There are no guards. You know what I'm saying? There's no shackles. And I'm just giving free game that was given to me. Free the goddamn.
Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.